Johnny went to the ball game today, and we didn't know that it was going to end the time or if he was even going to feel like coming back. So enjoy yourself. We're going to take care of it. Pastor, you got anything to say before we sing?
I will wait and make my remarks after you finish. Thank you.
Hey, Gary, would you please ask the blessing on the food that we've already been eating, and then on our worship and then Bible study?
Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you, Lord, for the privilege of getting together to study your word. Lord, watch over us and care for us. Father, we thank you for the many blessings that you give us through our daily lives. We pray, Lord, that we can reach out to others and spread the love that you've given us. Lord, as we prepare to sing, please bless our hearts with the words and the music. And Father, as we study your word tonight, may we take it into our hearts this week. Thank you for this church, for the love of this family. We ask this name for thy sake.
Now, grab one of those hymnals, 487. Since Jesus came into my heart. 487. Huh? Yeah. Alright, here we go. What a wonderful change in my life has been wrought since Jesus came into my heart. When I cried and my soul, for which long I had sworn, since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. What a joy of my soul, like the sea billows roll. Since Jesus came into my heart. I'm possessed of a hope that is steadfast and sure, since Jesus came into my heart. And though dark clouds of doubt now my pathway obscure, since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. What the joy of my soul, like the sea billows roll. Since Jesus came into my heart. Alas, I shall go there to dwell in that city I know, since Jesus came into my heart. And I'm happy, so happy, it's onward I go, since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. What the joy of my soul, like the sea billows roll. Since Jesus came into my heart. 491. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing his mercy and his grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, he'll prepare us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout and shout. We're going to pep that tempo up just a little bit, folks. We're going to actually make it sound like we're more of in a hurry to get there. Okay? Second verse, a little quicker. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sign. When we all get to heaven, Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of His glory will look toward the glory day. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Onward to the rising chorus, to His music we'll behold. Soon the pearly gates will open, we shall tread the streets of gold. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory.
All right. Thank you, Ernie, and I appreciate it very much doing that for us. Well, in case you haven't heard, the Cardinals won this afternoon. They are the Central Division champions. It's been a while since that has happened, and so that's cause for some celebration. All right, a couple of things as we begin, and Ed, I really did mean it. I was just kidding. Glad to see all of you here, but I'm particularly glad to see the Amicuses and the readers back with us tonight. And there are two reasons for that. One, Betty has had surgery on her back and is recovering from that. And I'd understood today was your first day back at church this morning. So we're really grateful to see you tonight. Glad you and David can be with us. And then Reba shared with me this afternoon that Gary has received word that his father, who lived in Appomattox area in Virginia, has passed away. And so Gary, again, our prayers for you as a brother and for your family. I learned this afternoon that the reason Beth Box was taken to the hospital this morning was that she was having difficulty breathing. And they determined that she has pneumonia. And so she's been admitted, and they'll be treating her for that over the next couple of days. The other thing that I want to remind you is that Amanda Anderson, and I apologize that I didn't have her last name this morning, I just was not able to recall it. But anyway, her name is Amanda Anderson. Her her husband is Ben, and of course it's Victoria's sister, and this is the first baby in their family. So you can remember what that's like, some of you, and so we'll be praying for them. The doctors are planning to induce labor sometime tonight, as Wayne explained, between 8 o'clock and midnight. They're going to call her and say, "We got a bed, come on in." So with an induced labor and a first child, it'll be sometime tomorrow. It conceivably could even be sometime Tuesday. It just depends on how nature goes. But anyway, we certainly want to be praying with them both for the safety of Amanda and the baby, and then just for joy for that family, that all will go well. So those are some things I wanted to mention to you in prayer. A couple of other things before we pray. We have received, and I meant to say this morning in church, and frankly just forgot. I did send out an email a while ago. We have received the proof copy of our pictorial directory. We will be reviewing that in the next day or so. The reason I mention it is there were some of you who joined our church recently may not have gotten pictures in there. They have told me that we can submit additional photos. So if you're not in the pictorial directory and you would like to be, if you can just submit a photo, we'll be glad to submit that for you to the directory company, and you'll be put in alphabetically just with the other pictures. So they did tell me we could do that. So kind of help me pass that word around for anybody that missed the the opportunity. Hope you got a chance to see the new bus this morning. From what I can tell, I didn't go inside, but from the outside, it really looks clean, both inside and out. And so be praying about that as we look at how we will finance that and what a worthy addition it would be to our bus ministry if we can have it. And then Thursday, the Pep Club is going to Pilot Knob, Missouri, about, an hour and a half or so south of us for lunch. And so we'll be leaving here about 10 o'clock in the morning, Thursday morning. Anybody whose driver's license says you're 55 or older is welcome to go along. So anyway, that'll be coming up Thursday. We'll go down there for lunch, get back around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So what is the name of the place? Do you recall?
Fort Davidson.
Fort Davidson. Thank you. I'm sorry?
FDC. Fort Davidson Cafe.
Oh, okay. FDC. Makes sense to me. Okay, so we'll be going down there, and I went online and checked their menu. It looks like it's going to be a really good place to eat. And yeah, so I appreciate you all setting that up. And they have made me designated driver. They know that when they make trips, if I'm driving, it improves their spiritual life because they all get scared to death and rededicate. So anyway, that's coming up Thursday. Okay. A lot going on in October. I sent out the newsletter this past week. If you didn't take time to read it, next Sunday, first Sunday of the month, so we'll have breakfast. We will also have the Lord's Supper in the morning service and baptism in the morning service. And we have the new trays that were purchased with memorial funds, and we'll be using those Sunday morning. Sunday night, we'll continue our study of the book of Exodus. And I do need to mention that there are 2 more weeks, the 6th and the 13th, that we'll be doing this, and then we'll be interrupted. Because on the 20th, which is our 60th anniversary, we're going to have lunch following the service, and it'll be a long day. We will not try to have an evening service that day. That's on the 20th. The 27th, the folks that were here this morning, the Gerkeys from Texas, Brenda and I will be in Texas, where I will have the privilege of doing their granddaughter's wedding. And so that Sunday night, Steve Brown will be leading worship and probably won't be teaching Exodus. I don't know what Steve will be doing, but he'll be doing something else. So when I come back in November, we'll pick up our study of Exodus and literally go through the month of November. So I'm really enjoying preparing these studies. And someone said something to me here, I don't know, a year or so ago, a friend of mine, he said, well, as long as you've been in the ministry, all you have to do is just pull out something you've done. And, you know, I have reached a point where, quite honestly, I don't find that satisfying. So as I shared with you, this series on the Sermon on the Mount that we finished this morning, that's all brand new stuff. I've never done that before. This particular study of Exodus as a topical approach, I've never done that before. And I am enjoying the challenge of covering some new material and plowing some new ground. Bear with me though, because I may hit a root now and again. And, you know, I'll try to avoid that if I can. But, all right, that's enough of that. Let's take a moment to pray together, and then let's get into the Word. Father, I thank you for each one that's here, and I pray your blessing upon each home. Lord, I pray that you would be with us this evening. We're grateful to have Gary and Linda and David and Betty back with us. We pray Betty will continue to heal, and we pray for Gary and his family. We pray for Beth Fox, Lord, that you would have your hand upon her physical being to heal her from the pneumonia that she suffers. We pray that you'll be with Amanda and Ben, and that you'll watch over them and this unborn child as they go through this procedure tonight, tomorrow. Lord, we just pray for the health of both mother and baby. And then, Lord, we are reminded to pray for Kevin, for Betty Dohak's son, as he faces this amputation of the toe. Lord, for all that he has already been through, we know this is difficult, and we just pray that your grace would extend to Kevin Dobbins, to his wife Donna, and their family. Then, Lord, we pray that you would be with us. Help us as we study your word tonight to enjoy the fellowship with each other and the opportunity to share the word, even as we've had the opportunity to share the food. We thank you for that, for the fellowship and the time in your word. Let your Holy Spirit help us to understand and apply what you've as revealed in the book of Exodus. Okay? And I've given it as a subtitle, The Drama of Redemption. And part of the reason for that is there is so much imagery that comes from the book of Exodus that we find in the New Testament, particularly in Paul's writings, but certainly in the Gospels as well. And in fact, in my opinion, you cannot understand or appreciate the message of the book of Hebrews if you haven't read the book of Exodus first. And it's just because there's just so much that is tied together there. So Exodus is that drama played out in the people of Israel. So this is Egypt, and as I mentioned last week, as you look at these things that are generally associated with Egypt, it's important to keep in mind that these issues, particularly the pyramids, the Sphinx, and the mast, predate Moses by 1,000 years or more. So these features, these structures were quite old when the Israelites were in Egypt. Now, this is the temple of Ramses, and we believe that Ramses was the Pharaoh that Moses faced down. We'll talk more about that next week in the 10 plagues. So this one would not have been that old, but certainly the pyramid, the Sphinx would certainly have. And so it may help us, we go visit old things. Years ago, Brenda and I had the chance to go with some friends to Portugal. And one night we stayed in a Portuguese state-run hotel, which actually was a 10th century castle. And it really puts you in some perspective to sleep in a bed in a room that is over 1,000 years old. And so, time is a relative thing. But as you think about it, it may help to keep that in mind. Now, here's a map of the Exodus, and as we shared last week, when the children of Jacob and their families came to Egypt, they settled in the land of Goshen. Now, what made Goshen such a choice place to live was the Nile River. And I'm not sure if you can see it, but the Nile goes this way and this way, and the Nile flows north, okay? But when it comes down out of the mountains, it brings a lot of mineral with it, and it floods what is called the delta, because it's a triangle that is between the two forks of the Nile River, and it makes it a very fertile farmland. And so the Israelites were welcomed to Egypt, to one of the choice places. It'd be like if you invited a relative to move to St. Louis and you set them up in Ladue. It's that kind of a thing. So they dwelt there. They dwelt there, and for approximately 400 years, they enjoyed that. But after about 75, I guess you've heard the saying that people and fish have one thing in common: 3 days in your house, they smell. Okay? And so you remember last week we looked at a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, and the Israelites who were welcomed guests all of a sudden became unwelcomed slaves. And that's where we find them in Moses' day. And so I shared with you that Exodus is the second book of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And the name Exodus actually comes from Latin, which means outgoing or departure. But the Hebrews would call it, if you were talking with a Jew about the book of Exodus, he would recognize it as Shema, which means names. And where that comes from is just the first word that appears in Hebrew. And it was their custom, whatever the first word is in a book, that's the title of the book. And so that's what. Now, we know Moses is the source, if not the author of the book. And as Exodus concludes, we read of the death of Moses. And so it would be difficult for Moses to be the author of his own death. But anyway, we do know that Moses was the source. Okay, and then I mentioned why we have the Exodus. Why did God do that? And what did he achieve in his plan of redemption when he did? And so I listed the things. In the first place, he fulfilled God's promise to the patriarchs, and we'll talk about that tonight. He rescued Israel from slavery. He created a priestly people. The Israelites didn't understand that, never did fully about that tonight. So this evening I'd like to talk a little bit about the promise of God. Okay? And subtitle, God hears Israel's prayers. So if you brought your Bible, you might want to turn to Exodus chapter 3. We'll be looking at 3, 4, and 5 as we talk about the burning bush and the call of Moses. And this sets the stage for Moses to then go and confront Pharaoh in Egypt, and that's what we'll deal with next week. Okay? So in Exodus 3, it says, Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Now last week, when I was talking with you about the providence of God, one of the points I wanted to make is that what the world calls a coincidence, we call providence. And the world says, wasn't that lucky? And we say, no, that was God. And one of the examples of that, when you consider the life of Moses, here was a man that began his life under the condemnation of death and wound up rescued and redeemed to Pharaoh's own household. So he had all of the educational and cultural benefits of the best family in all of Egypt. But because Pharaoh's daughter was not capable of being a wet nurse, Moses' mother was hired to become Moses' wet nurse. And in doing so, not only did she have the privilege of raising her son through his childhood, but being paid to do it. Okay? I know some of you women feel like you were unpaid when you raised your kid. But anyway, that was one of those things that, again, was the providence of God. Now, consider this for just a moment. Okay? Moses spent approximately 40 years in Egypt, in the household of Pharaoh, and yet his mother shared with him all of his Hebrew heritage. Okay? Then he went out into the wilderness and he meets Jethro's daughters, as we talked last week. And in fact, Jethro gives him Zipporah, one of his daughters, to be Moses' wife. But notice what it says. His father-in-law, the priest of Midian. So for 40 years, he lived in Egypt. And in his childhood, he heard about the God of the Hebrews. But he also learned about all the gods of the Egyptians. Then he goes out into the wilderness, and Jethro is a priest of Almighty God. So now he's living under Jethro's tutelage, and Jethro teaches him about God. We don't know whether Moses was a willing or unwilling student at this point in his life. However, I included this lower phrase in verse 6, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Okay? Let's see how that fits together. Okay? And of course, I found this illustration, thought you might like to see that, just the burning bush illustrated. When I was in college, I worked with a young man, and I may have told you this story before. When I first went to college, there wasn't any opportunity to preach, but there was an opportunity to lead the music in this little country church. And the young man that was the preacher that invited me to do that, anyway, Jerry was a pretty capable preacher, and he preached a sermon one time that I've always remembered. The title of the sermon was Any Old Bush Will Do. And it was based upon this passage. So the thing about the burning bush is not to think about the bush, but the God who inhabited the burning bush. And so it says, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. Now, by this time, Moses had been long enough in the Sinai wilderness that he'd pretty well been around, it would be difficult for something to surprise him. But this did. It says, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire. Remember that phrase. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. are standing is holy ground. Friday night, I had the privilege of doing my oldest granddaughter's wedding. And that's a whole new genre for me. You know, I had the privilege of baptizing all of my grandchildren, and that was certainly a joy. But now to start marrying them off, and I'm going to have to take better care of myself to make sure I'm around for some of the others. Casey and I were talking here a while back, and she said, "Now, Grandpa, I don't want any baby in the bathtub stories, and I really would like for you to keep it simple." And I said, "Well, Casey, I have to behave myself because if I act up with you, nobody else will ask me." So anyway, we did have a great time, and it was a very special privilege. But instead of being married in church, their members in active down at Canaan Baptist Church, they decided to go to a venue, which a lot of kids do today. Had the reception and the wedding and everything right there together. And so as we began the ceremony, I shared with folks that God was present in that place because we had asked him to join us. And that made that place for that time holy ground. The only thing that makes any place or any person holy is the presence of God. There is nothing in Scripture, there is nothing in our world that is holy standalone. We are holy. That is, we are saints. We are only saints because of our relationship with God. And so when God says to Moses, "Remove your sandals, for this place is holy ground," it is not because the bush was there or the bush was burning there. It was because God was there. And I had asked you to make note of that phrase in verse 2, "The angel of the Lord appeared to him." Okay? But then in verse 4, it acknowledges that God is speaking to Moses out of the bush. And sometimes folks say, "Well, wait a minute. Was it an angel or was it God?" And the reality is, in the Old Testament, angels were simply the extension of God's presence. And so saying that it was an angel of the Lord, it was a manifestation of the Lord. And so God was present in that bush, and he called Moses by name. One of these days, when I stand before God in heaven, God will not call me, "Hey, you." He will call me by my name. And I'm afraid he'll call me buddy. Because as some of you have heard me say, only God and my family get to use that name. But it is my intimate family name. And God will treat me as intimate family because he knows me through and through. So God called Moses by his name. And so then as we continue, he says, "Now behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians are oppressing them. Therefore come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt." Okay. God says to Moses, "I have heard their prayers." Now we have to go back to the 12th chapter of Genesis to remind ourselves of the covenant promise that God had made to Abraham. He told Abraham if he would trust God enough, of course he was Abram at that time, if he would trust God enough to move from Ur of the Chaldees, where he was, to the land of Canaan, the land of promise, God would bless him so that his descendants would be more numerous than the sands of the seashore or the stars in the sky. Okay? And that he would give him that choice land. Well, if you remember the story, Abraham got to Canaan with his family, and twice he stopped and built altars of thanksgiving to God. But as he moved further south in Canaan, down into the area of what later became Judea, there was a famine in the land. Being a shepherd and a nomad, Abram took his family to Egypt because everyone knew in that historic time that Egypt was referred to as the breadbasket of the ancient world. Egypt had crops when no one else did, and so they fled to Egypt. Egypt then comes to represent being out of the will of God. And you remember what happened to Abram and to Sarah and the mess that was Pharaoh to leave and to go back, which they did. Abram later was to learn that he could trust God completely. But it was that promise that God had made to him. And so he says to Moses, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen their oppression. And he says, so now I will send you. Okay. If his mother had not raised him as a suckling child, he might never have known of the heritage that he possessed. Okay? Remember verse 6? I am the God of your father. Now, think about this for a moment. I am the God of your father, not your fathers. Okay? So he's not saying I am the historic God of your tribe. I am the personal God of your father. I am the God of your family. But then he goes on to say, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. How would Moses have known who Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were, except that his mother passed along that heritage to him? Because, see, it wasn't written down in those days. It was all oral tradition. And so, when God identifies himself to Moses by that name, if Moses did not have that background to prepare him, he would not have known. And I'm guessing, I'm connecting dots in my mind here, but I'm guessing that Jethro, the Midianite priest, also connected some of those dots for Moses so that he would know. Okay. Now, God has said, here's who I am. Here's what I want you to do. Now you go and do it. And Moses said, wait a minute. Not so fast. I have questions. All right? And as we read through the book of Exodus, we discover in chapters 3 and 4, he had essentially 4 questions. Okay? Who am I that I should face Pharaoh? And if it was indeed Ramses II, as history suggests, it would have been the most powerful, the most warlike Pharaoh in all of the history of Egypt. And the second, who are you that you would send me? We'll say a little more about that in just a moment. The third, what if they don't believe me? And finally, I'm not an eloquent man. Can you send someone else? So these were the objections or the questions that Moses raised as God told him, this is the purpose that I have for you. And so it says, but Moses said to God, who am I? That I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt. He was the best equipped of any man of his age. Because of his history in Egypt, he was familiar with the court of Pharaoh. He was familiar with the customs of the court. He would not have any difficulty going to Egypt and working in that environment. He would not have any problem understanding the heritage that would drive him to that mission because of what he had learned. Okay? And so God said, the God of your fathers has sent, Moses then said, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to him? And it's important, I think, for us to understand the implication of Moses asking God's name. Remember, I said a while ago, Moses grew up in Egypt. Egypt had gods for everything. Okay? And so he came out of what we call a very polytheistic society. Okay? And so for him to ask that question was perfectly understandable. When he said, who are you, Lord? The Old Testament gods were polytheistic. They were social, that is, they interacted with human beings. They were territorial, in that one God was God over here and another God was God over there. And they kind of had their separate things. If you know anything about the gods of Egypt, or if you know anything about Roman and Greek mythology, certain gods had certain venues. See, one was the god of the sea, and one was the god of the air, and one was the god of love, and one was the god of war, and they all had their dominion. Okay, that becomes important when we look at how God led Moses to confront Pharaoh later. Okay, so and then fractiousness among the gods. Gods fighting among themselves. Gods having affairs with other gods' spouses and all this kind of stuff. And so that kind of polytheistic society was a genuine mess. So it is not an insult for Moses to say, "Who are you?" He was not questioning whether God was God. He was questioning which God he was. Because in Moses' mind, there were many choices. So, as Moses would come to learn, Yahweh is omnipotent. That is, he is all powerful. He is omniscient, which means he is all knowing. And he is omnipresent, which means he's in all places. Now, I'll give you a quick preview for next week. Okay. One of the questions that Pharaoh put to Moses is, in Egypt, I'm God. Why should I give in to the wishes of a God of Sinai? You go out to Sinai and tell that God to stay in his own territory. This is my territory. Because, see, Pharaoh was a God in Egypt. And so the concept was, in this polytheistic system, that Pharaoh was the God here, like the sheriff. This is my county. And God was the God in the wilderness. And so he said, well, why should I listen to a God? This isn't even his county. So pardon my expression, but that's what's going on there, okay? Now, it may help us to just pause and reflect on the Old Testament names for God that we find throughout Scripture. You're familiar with at least some of these. He is El Shaddai, God Almighty. He is Yahweh Shalom, the Lord our peace. Yahweh Shammah, the Lord present. Yahweh Kadesh, the Lord who makes you holy. Remember what I said? Nothing or no one is holy unless God is present in them. Yahweh Nissi, the Lord our banner. Yahweh Rohi, the Lord our healer. Yahweh Roy, the Lord our shepherd. Yahweh Jireh, the Lord provides. And Adonai, which I'm sure you recognize as the word of the Lord. Now, notice I use Yahweh. Someone says, well, I thought that if I have the King James, I thought it said Jehovah. Okay, interesting story about Jehovah. Okay, the name Jehovah does not exist as a name for God. It exists as a combination word that was created as a coded word for God. If anyone would presume to give God a nickname, Jehovah would be it, and here's why. If you take the consonants of Yahweh, the four consonants, and you take the vowel points of Adonai, and you put them together, and I tried to change the colors a little bit so you could see how they would fit together, we get Jehovah, because there is no J in Hebrew. Okay? So that's where the J comes from. The A becomes E, and you see the H, the O, the W becomes a V, the second A becomes an A, and the final H becomes, again, an H. So Jehovah is a contrived name for God. Okay? That's where it came from. Why do we need a contrived name for God? Because the Hebrews, when they read Yahweh in Scripture, would never say Yahweh. They would always pronounce Adonai. And that's why in your Bible, in even modern translations, when you read and it says the Lord says or does, and the word Lord is in all caps, that is an editorial device to tell you that it's not the word Adonai in the original text, it's the name Yahweh. And so, when David said, the Lord is my shepherd, that's not what David said at all. David said, Yahweh is my shepherd. We read it, the Lord is my shepherd, because we respect the Hebrew tradition of not wanting to take God's name in vain. In their desire to not take his name in vain, they didn't take his name at all. And so when he gives us that privilege to call him by his name, how sad it is that some, out of fear of abusing the privilege, would not exercise the privilege at all. But that's where Jehovah comes from. Now, if I took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then he said, put your hand into your bosom again, and when he pulled it out, his hand was totally clear. Leprosy was one of the most dreaded diseases of the ancient world. And so God used something so stark to convince Moses that he was capable of making Moses capable of doing what God wanted him to do. All right, then it continues. He says, please, Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, nor since you have spoken to your servant. For I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. Please, Lord, now send the message by whomever you will. You ever had an experience in your life where you sense that God was wanting you to do something, and you simply decided not to do it? When I went through seminary, most of the guys were my age. A few of them were a little younger. But there were a couple of guys that were in their early 50s. One of our best friends was an attorney in McAlester, Oklahoma, and he resigned his practice in his early 50s because he sensed that God had called him to preach as a young man, and he said no. And so as a 50-some-year-old man, he resigned a professional, very successful practice, went to Fort Worth, Texas, and we were seminary students together. Okay? And so there are those times in a person's life when, for one reason or another, God says, this is what I want you to do. And we say no. Find someone else. Now, here's one little add-in that I want to mention to you. And that is sometimes folks are concerned about the will of God. Okay? I want God's will to be done. As Jesus said in the Lord's Prayer in the Sermon on the Mount, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The reality is, it is not up to me for God's will to be done. It's up to God. God is not dependent upon me for his will to be accomplished. God is offering to me the opportunity to help accomplish it. God's will be done whether I choose to do it or not. The loss is not God's, that he won't get to do what he wants to. The loss is mine, that I won't get to share it. And so as we think about God's will, if Moses had in fact said no, fled out into the desert and gone away, God would have raised another. But in this case, as you know, he raised up Aaron, Moses' brother. And he said, all right, I'll send Aaron with you. So Moses asked the question, who do you think I am? And then he asked God, who do you think you are? And he says, if I go back to the Hebrews, they won't believe me. And God said, I'll give you something to show them. And then he said, well, I'm not a very good speaker. And God said, I can take care of that too. And so he did. And so God had answers. I will be with you. The name Yahweh, and most of you have heard this, those four consonants in Hebrew are actually a construct of the verb to be. Okay? And that's why I am that I am is the most common translation of that. But here's the thing. In Hebrew, which by the way, in ancient Hebrew, there were no vowels. There were only consonants. There are 39 of them. Okay? Those four consonants can just as accurately be translated. I will be what I have been. I am that I am. Okay? I will be what I am now. And here's why I called tonight's lesson the promise of God. I believe that I am, which is the more traditional interpretation, is not a correct translation of those four letters. Because God said, and you remember he introduced himself to Moses in verse 6 of chapter 3, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God of your father. Okay? God had made a promise to Abraham. He had returned to fulfill that promise. And he has called out Moses to be the instrument of that fulfillment. So those 4 letters can just as accurately be translated, what I have been, I will be. And he's saying to Moses, the faithfulness that I demonstrated to your forefathers, I will demonstrate to you and the Israelites. And of course, we know he does. Okay? And so, now, all right, that's Hessel's free translation, admittedly. So don't go home and throw out all your books on Exodus, because others have opinions too. But my point is, when you think about that, it is open to interpretation, or I think misinterpretation. I am that I am sounds a little bit funny anyway to me, you know. But for the God of promise to say what I have always been, I will continue to be, is exactly who he is. And so then he went on, showing Moses that he would authenticate Moses' message, and then of course he would give him a helper. So Moses had said, then what if they will not believe me or listen to what I say? For they may say, the Lord has not appeared to you. The Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And the reason I call you back to that is because oftentimes in our lives, God is calling upon us to do something. And we say, I don't know if I can do that. And God says to us quite literally, what's in your hand? What have I given you to help you to be what you need to be and to do what you need to do? And so this is a testimony to the faithfulness of God. By the way, I told you I studied Hebrew, didn't I? The Hebrew word for faithful is enuma. God is faithful. It is another way of saying God is righteous. And it means simply that God is always God. There is no inconsistency in God. There is no wavering in God. What I have been, I will continue to be. God has made that promise. Okay. Now, thought you might be interested in this. That's what sunrise looks like on Mount Sinai, where Moses met God. Someone looked at that picture a while back and said, I don't see any bushes. It was a pretty barren wilderness. And that's why it was inhabited by nomads. But that is what is believed to be Mount Sinai, which, by the way, is simply another name for Mount Horeb. So in case you wonder where Horeb comes from, it's actually referred to as the Sinai Peninsula. But that's Mount Sinai. Again, it's also called Mount Horeb. Okay. Here's what I want to close with. Jesus is our strength and the assurance of God's promises to us. Paul said over in Philippians, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And as I shared last Wednesday night in our Bible study, as we concluded our study of the book of Philippians, the Greek word that translates strengthens also translates the English word enables. I can do all things through Christ who enables me. What is that in your hand? That's the promise that God gives us. Okay. Paul said over in 2 Corinthians, for the Son of God, Christ Jesus, who was preached among you by us, was not yes and no, but is yes in him. For as many as are the promises of God, in him they are yes. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the God who was, who is, and always shall be. And what I was, I will be. That's the faithfulness of God. What do you think? Gives us a perspective on God's promise, how far God is willing to go to keep that promise. Now, as we'll talk about next week, the Israelites were in bondage in Egypt for almost 400 years. So, someone might ask, well, if God, who is faithful, heard their prayers and their pleas as he told Moses, why did it take 400 years? And I don't have an answer for that, except that I know in the plan of God there is purpose. And so I found this saying years ago, and I can't even, someone in my Sunday school class this morning said, isn't that in the Bible somewhere? Like one of those phrases that just sounds familiar, but to my knowledge it is not. The stones of God's gristmill may grind painfully slow, but they grind exceedingly fine. And so, again, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Okay. Next week, we'll talk about the power of God, and we'll look at the 10 plagues that God used to release and redeem the Israelites from the hands of the Egyptians. Hey, I appreciate everybody being here tonight. Remember the prayer concerns that we have for this week, especially today and tomorrow. Remember also that next Saturday is our Harvest Festival. And there have been a number of folks, some of you, in fact, working behind the scenes for some time to get ready for this. It sounds like beginning Thursday, the weather is going to cool down real nice. Highs in the mid-70s, lows in the 50s at night. Could be a great time for an outdoor festival. I pray that it will be. The last 2 years, as some of you know, we got rained out. So we're really praying that won't happen this time. But we've got some things that we're looking forward to. Obviously, things for the children, things for adults, food, as Johnny mentioned this morning. We added a couple of things this year. One of those is a petting zoo for the kids, goats and whatever else they bring. And the other is pony riding. So if you have grandkids or neighbor kids or friends that have children, pass along to them, because it's all free, that they can come and go on a hay ride, they can come and ride the pony, they can come and pet the goats, we'll let them wash their hands when they're done, and or anything else they want to do. Linda?
What time is the petting zoo?
I'm sorry?
What time is the petting zoo? Do you know?
I think they'll be here from like 1 to 2:30 or 3. We booked them for 2 hours. They will not be here all afternoon. The festival is open from noon to 5, but they'll be here for about a 2-hour slot in that time. So.
Are the ponies part of that?
The ponies are also part of that. The same company is bringing the pony or ponies and is bringing the petting zoo. I tell you who you could ask and find out is Lisa Muser.
This time was advertised on it. If they think they're coming and they're going to see that at 3 o'clock, you know.
Yeah, I understand. And
Disappointing.
yeah, no, we don't want to disappoint anybody. I'll find that out and I'll put it out in an email this week so people will know. Because yeah, the pony and the petting zoo will not be here for all 5 hours. It cost us, well, it cost us an arm and a leg to have them for 2 hours. So we decided not to splurge beyond that. But anyway, good question. I'm glad you asked. Okay, good to see everyone, as always. Thank you for bringing the food and sharing it with each other. I understand some of it is food that was used for the rehearsal dinner for Jackie Smith Art and James Glasgow. Brenda, is that what you told me?
Yes.
Is that correct? So we are indebted to them, and they're off to Texas on their honeymoon. And so pray God's blessings upon them. Good to see y'all. Let's close in prayer. Eric, would you word it for us, please?
Father, we thank you, Lord, for the blessing that you've given us here tonight, Lord. Thank you for the words that you spoke to Moses, Lord, that resonate in our And God, we thank you that you're the God that once was and always will be. And Lord, for your consistency in the way that you love us and come after us. Watch over us, care for us, Lord. There's many, many prayer requests in this room. We know that you'll hear them and answer them in your own precious way. And again, thank you so much for this church. In Jesus' name, I say.
Amen. All right. God bless you, folks. Yes, ma'am.
We need to get rid of the spaghetti